Alright everybody, welcome. My name is Dryga. If your if the YouTube title didn't tell you, my name is Dryga. And today I'm actually going to try something, not that I was expecting to try. Something different. I thought of this a little while after seeing the Nostalgia Critic doing a whole bunch of episode reviews of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Korra, and as of now Adventure Time, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I can see why people like it. I decided to try this differently, maybe using a book series instead of a TV series or a movie series. I can understand why this might cause issues, especially if said books are not released yet. Because it would be a big gap between what's here as the newest book and what is here as the latest book or what's going to come next. Whereas the series would be weekly and everything. This would be more yearly, depending on how quickly the books are released. But I'm going to start out with a series that a lot of people have been looking into lately, and I'm going to be honest, I am late on getting on this bandwagon, and I'm so regretting being late on it. As of now, I'm about... right there's the bookmark, so about that far through the book, and it's going to be Game of Thrones. Just get that in the camera. This is probably a remake, 'cause this is actually telling us about, you know, the HBO series on here. But, so this is probably a later edition that's been remade. But I'm about a little less than halfway through the book. I'm going to say right now that at first, in the first couple of chapters, I was like, okay, I like the world this is in, but the characters are uninteresting. That was about until they ran into the direwolf pups. When Jon finds the dead wolf, or whoever it was at the time finds the dead wolf, and, you know, they later then find the pups, you know, with the staghorn through the direwolf mother's throat, and finding the wolf pups. That's what mostly caught my interest, because once the wolf pups showed up, things started getting a lot more interesting, and I was definitely thinking, okay, how are these going to play a role? Maybe defensive, war-wise? Obviously, they mention it being the wolf and the staghorn being a sign. And I'm like, okay, what does that even mean? I don't see where this is going. There's some kind of sign, something's going on, until they later mention that the dire wolf is actually the symbol for the Starks. That caught my interest, and that made me think, okay, so some either a horn or a stag or something is going to be the symbol of some other family. There's something going on here. Some other family is going to actually get involved, and this is going to get ugly. What I didn't expect was for the stag to be the king's symbol, the Baratheon symbol, and on top of that, for him to be Ned Stark's best friend. I should probably also clarify that I forget if I did or didn't. I have not watched the series yet. I'm starting it off with the book first, and once I reach the end of the series, I plan to start watching the show, just so that I actually know what's going to happen and I can see the differences between the two, because that is one thing I do enjoy taking a look at. when it comes between movies and the books. I love seeing the differences between them, why they did it or how they did it. Um, there are a lot of things in that kind of setup that do irritate me, but that's for a different video. That's not for this. Moving on with the book. Anyway, Baratheon symbol discovered. King best friends to Ned. The wolf pups showing up. I definitely got a weird thing when Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf, showed up, especially when he first talked to Jon. I forget exactly how it was put, but it said that as he was walking in, I'm completely paraphrasing this. I don't exactly remember how it went, but it said as he was walking in, Jon said he walked as tall as a king. Now, obviously, Game of Thrones, it's going to be something politically related. Under normal circumstances, that doesn't interest me, at least in the current stand-up of politics and stuff. I don't like current politics at all. I find it boring, and I can't find any interest in it. Unless something pops up that's going to affect me in some way, I don't care. Especially when it's in a book or novel, I really don't care. But when it's something in, like, the medieval settings, something in, like, where Winterfell and the whole country is set up, that's what catches my interest. That kind of intrigue, that kind of setup. And honestly, it's caught me off guard at how much I enjoy this. Okay, I've looked at the book, I've started reading, I've gotten caught up in it, and I can't stop. It's been amazing so far. And I've been having my own thoughts and theories, which, once I get to the current point I'm at in the book, I will give you my thoughts on where it's going to go, what's going to happen at this point. And if nobody even watches this video, I don't give a shit. I just want to have a chronicle of my progression through this series. And maybe more series, I don't know. Where was I now? Right, King shows up, he goes, okay, look, Stark, I want you to be the hand. I want you to be my right hand, advising me, guiding me, showing me how to, helping me become a good king. And then we find out, or at least before this, we find out that he was basically, Ned's sister, younger sister, was betrothed to Robert Baratheon, who was the king. We found that much out. And okay, that's great. She died in the war. Okay, interesting. The war in which Robert won the throne, along with Ned, Lord Arryn. I forget his first name right now. It's going to come to me later. It's going to irritate me, but Lord Arryn, or Arryn, or Aaron, however you want to pronounce it. Again, I haven't watched the video, the show. I don't know how they pronounce it there. But okay, little jump cut, nothing big. Just a little interruption. Anyway, moving on. They were going into war. There was a bunch of them that went against them, against the Targaryens, which were the Dragon Kings, the conquerors, the cruel overlords, the way it's depicted from this side anyway. Whether or not it's different from the other side, I'm not 100% sure, as we find out that there are 2 surviving members of that family. A kid who was maybe, I want to say it was 8, I think it was, at the time, who managed to escape. So it's kind of going to be painted in a biased kind of way because the kid was a kid. He probably didn't understand what exactly was going on at the time, didn't understand the politics and whatnot that was happening. And also a daughter, Dany, Daenerys, I think it is. Daenerys, I think is her full name. Who was born after the takeover, after the Targaryens lost their throne and majority of them died. Um, so, anyway, moving on. Major points that happened so far, we find that out after um, a lot of deliberation between Ned and Catelyn, his wife. He decides, yes, I will take on I will take the place of the Hand, because Lord Orin had been the Hand before that, and only recently had they been informed by his wife, which was Catelyn's sister, that her husband had not died under normal circumstances. He had been murdered. Which nobody else seems to question, for whatever reason. Now, my thoughts at this point were like, okay, nobody's questioning this. Either A, Caitlyn's sister, Lisa, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced either. I'm gonna go with Lisa. Lisa is insane, and or, what's the word I'm trying to think of? She's paranoid, that's it. She's paranoid. Or she actually has a point here and he was murdered. Which, if point B is the case and he was murdered, which it makes me wonder who was involved, why it happened, and on top of that, why is no one else looking into this? Because we later find out, or maybe it was earlier we find out, that Oren fostered both Ned and Robert, so that's how they know each other. They were childhood friends at the time, and that's where they met, and it became, best friends and whatnot. That's how they know Oren, and that's where it's heading. So, we now have Ned, who's accepted being the Hand, if only to find out why... John, that was his name. His name was John. John Arryn. Why John Arryn died. How he died. He wants to find out the truth of that. The other thing that he's also figured out is what he's also suspecting, is that the Lannisters, which include Robert's wife, his children, his wife's sister, or not sister, twin brother, Jaime, as well as the father, Tyrell, and Tyrion, the dwarf, who I'm going to say actually seems a lot more capable, especially when his first entrance to Jon was him jumping off a balcony, somersaulting, and landing it. He seems a lot more capable than he lets on, especially after that entrance. After that entrance, literally doing that, he's a dwarf. I don't want to say midget, but that's what most people call them now. He's a midget. He does flips from at least second story, I think it was. It was at least a second story balcony. Down to the ground floor. Lands it just fine. Wow. Anyway, after that, things start going on with Jon. Not Jon Arryn, Jon Snow, Ned Stark's bastard son. I mentioned the direwolf pups. Every one of the children got one. That would be Robb, Bronn, Sansa, Arya, and Rickon, or Rickett. I forget his name. I think it's Rickon. And then Jon. Jon got his own dire wolf was different than the rest. It was an albino wolf, and that wolf he named Ghost. Anyway, moving on, I'll name off any of the other wolves if they've done something of interest. After this, they've accepted that he's going to go and become the Hand to find out why Jon died and how he died. He doesn't trust the Lannisters, mainly because of the way Jaime acted when he found him during the war. He found Jaime sitting on Robert's throne. Sitting on a throne he was not entitled to and didn't win, and his acting of it was jovial. You would think that during a war, the man would be much more serious than laughing his ass off. I mean, Robert doesn't see this strange, and I can understand that. Especially if he knew Jaime Lannister beforehand as somewhat of a friend. I can see why that wouldn't be very suspicious seeming. But to someone like Robert, to Ned, who is very much an honorable man and very much respects people in that light, wouldn't do something like that. I can see why he would see that as a bad thing. He doesn't trust the Lannisters because of this, which we find out later is actually a very, very good thing, as it's tipped him off. Now, before we get on to him moving on, another major thing, moving on from Winterfell, three major things happen. One, Bronn falls. Here's what you don't need to know about Bronn. Bronn is either 7 or 8 years old, somewhere around there, and he's been all over Winterfell, the castle that the Starks live in. He climbs, and he is not afraid of heights. He's been doing this since as young as he can be. I think they said his earliest memory was of him climbing. He didn't remember learning to walk or learning to crawl or anything like that. He remembered learning to climb, and he climbs everywhere. His mother was always hysterical about it, saying, "Okay, you're going to fall." And there was all sorts of things they tried to do to make Bronn try to not climb, but none of it affected him. Nothing made him see it any other way. They even went so far as to show him a clay boy made a clay boy, both soft and hard, I believe. Probably a hardened one, probably one that was fired in a kiln, and dressed him up to look like Bronn, and dropped him from a high distance, and showed him the shattered remains, to which Bronn just says, "But I don't fall." And he's been doing this for at least 7, 8 years. He doesn't fall. Yeah, since he was born, whatever. Somewhat, maybe 5, 6 years then. He doesn't fall. That's the point I'm trying to get at. And what happens is, as he's going to climb up to one of the abandoned towers, one of his old usual hangouts, he overhears something on the way. What he ends up overhearing is what seems to be Jaime and his sister talking over why Ned Stark would accept being the Hand if he's, to them it seems like it's a power grab. Why would he do this? Why would he leave Winterfell when none of the Starks almost ever leave Winterfell? Why would he do this? Okay, so, answer time. Bronn overhears this. He also leans down into the window, and he realizes this is not something I'm supposed to hear, this is not something I'm supposed to see, but curiosity gets the best of him, and he ends up looking in the window, to which he sees what I believe is, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, speech problems, if I'm remembering correctly, is Jaime and his sister, what seems to be them making out, which would be incest, the twins making out, which is definitely strange and is definitely off-putting and makes me wonder what the hell is going on. Like, okay, there's obviously something going on here. I really doubt Robert knows about any of this going on. And it also calls into question, is Robert's sons, Joffrey, which is the oldest one, and I think he has one other one that I'm not recalling the name of. He showed up once when he fought Robb in Winterfell Yard. I remember that much. I remember he was also round, like heavy set. I don't remember his name though. But it makes me call into question, are those sons legitimately Robert's sons? Or are they Jaime and his sisters? And if you haven't noticed yet, I still can't remember the queen's name off the top of my head whatsoever. Yeah, that calls stuff into question. The second main thing that happens, besides Bronn is then, let's finish up this. Bronn is then shoved off because Bronn slips. He manages to grab onto the windowsill that he was at. Jaime grabs his hand and lifts him up, only to then shove him off because the queen says, oh, he overheard us. Which he did. Legitimately, he did. But I remember Jaime correctly. He says, oh, the things I do for love. And what crossed through my head, because my brain is full of stupid things, is the connection to Courage the Cowardly Dog, because that's always what he says. The things I do for love. Yeah. Courage the Cowardly Dog is somehow connected to Game of Thrones. I don't know. Anyway. Moving on. He falls. He's unconscious for a long time. I don't exactly know how long, but for a good while. Bronn is out of it. He shattered his legs. He's not going to walk again. And he's unconscious. Now, here's the other thing that happens before Ned leaves to head down to King's Landing, where, where the king is actually situated, where his throne is, where he lives, and where the Hand will now live. What happens next is Jon. Jon Snow. Ned thinks he should leave Jon in Winterfell. Catelyn says, no, I will not. He will just make his life worse. Because she hates Jon. Because, I guess to her, from the way I see it, it's one of Ned Stark's imperfections, and keeping Jon around and treating him like a human being, and not just ignoring him like most other people do that have bastard sons. It's like, I guess I would say it's more like rubbing salt into the wound. It's like, okay, look, I can forgive you. You accidentally cut me like this. Fine, that's great. But being kind to Jon and treating him like a true son for Catelyn is basically having Ned like rubbing the salt in her wounds. And she can't hate Ned. She loves Ned. So she puts all the hatred onto Jon. Which she won't actively do, but she will completely ignore Jon and anything he does. One of the best moments to show that off is as Jon shows up to bid his farewells to Bronn. He bids his farewells to Bronn, and as he's about to leave, Catelyn calls his name, and Jon looks back. Under normal circumstances, it says he would never do this, but he looks back because this is the first time she's actually used his name. So he looks back, and she goes, "It should have been you. It should have been you. Not Bronn. It should have been you that died. That has the shattered legs." That just shows me how cruel she really is to Jon. It's how much she really, really hates him. She would rather have him destroyed. And I understand a mother's love in that, in the fact that it's her child. Her child has the shattered legs and is unconscious. I get that. I get its grief. But it's still an extremely cruel thing to say. Anyway, moving on. Continuing with Jon. What ends up happening is Ned Stark's brother, Benjen, or Ben, as he's probably called most likely, Ben Stark mentions something that Jon told him earlier during the feast before he met Tyrion. Before Jon met Tyrion, he tells him that Jon expressed interest in meeting up, joining up with the Black Brothers, and working with the Wall, those on the Wall. Now, to join them, it would mean that he would have to take vows that would mean he can no longer have children. Jon would be forbidden to have any kind of children. He can't have any ties with family either. He'd be isolated up on the Wall. Save for Ben Stark, who's his Uncle Ben, which he can't show favoritism either, so pretty much that relationship is going to be cut off as well. Now, here we go with this. Before they leave, the final thing that happens before they leave to go to King's Landing for Ned and them to go off to King's Landing, which at this point is going to include Ned, Sansa, and Arya, or Arya. I always want to say Arya. Whatever. I'm just going to call her Arya from now on. It was originally going to have Bronn with it, but because of Bronn's fall, they can't bring Bronn. So it's just the two sisters and Ned that are going down. Ned agreed to let Bronn into the Black Brothers. I'm forgetting their name again because I'm stupid. Anyway, he agreed to let him go to the Wall. So right now, Bronn will be going to the Wall, or not Bronn. Jon will be going to the Wall. Arya, Sansa, and Ned are going down to King's Landing along with the Lannisters and Robert. Tyrion, on the other hand, has decided he wants to see what this wall is actually like. So he's going along with Jon and Ben, much to Ben's hatred, because Ben doesn't like the Lannisters either. He shares the same feelings as Ned with them. So they're going off. But before they do, Jon decides to give Arya, because we get some characterization there that Jon and Arya have always been close, mainly because of the fact that they're so similar, not only in appearance but the way they work, the way they think. Because Arya is jealous of Sansa. Sansa is like this beautiful princess, this whole pish-posh, oh god, fairy tales are real, they're gonna save me, I'm gonna be a princess. If you can't tell right now, I really dislike Sansa's attitude completely. It's always a pain in the ass to just trudge through those chapters that are based on Sansa. I'm always like, look, can you just give me something just give me something that's going to advance the plot and just get rid of Sansa. I don't care about her. She's one of the most irritating characters I've seen because she's so blind to reality. She's so invested in her fantasy, she's blind to reality, which I will get to that. I will. I don't know if it's going to be this video. I don't know if I'm going to separate this in two, but I will be getting to Sansa and how much she's irritated me so far in this series. And it's not even when they get to King's Landing, it's before that. It pisses me off. Anyway, the final thing that happens before they leave is that Jon has had a small sword made up for Arya. I forget exactly what it's called. Like what the type of sword is called. I remember the name of the sword because they name it before they leave. They name it Needle, after Arya's favorite thing, which sarcastically is needlework. She hates like knitting and needlework. So they named it Needle, what she hates most. And it's nice. It's a nice gift. John's giving it to her. She is so excited about this. And I couldn't be happier. I find Arya and Jon to be some of the most interesting characters. Just because of the way they're evolving. Arya is completely different than most ladies, or girls of her age, which want to be like the princess, like Sansa is. And that's the other thing. Because when she found out what Jon is, a bastard, she asked her own mother, because of how different she is to Sansa, she goes, am I a bastard? Or maybe it was Jon. I think it might have been Jon. Am I a bastard too? She asks him. And he goes, no, you're born of your mother. You are Caitlyn's daughter. Believe me, you would know if you were not. Or something like that. Which is great. And very kind. And I love the chemistry between the two characters. It seems so natural. I love it. Anyway.